started with a tweet. Bill Maher, the ever-controversial host of HBO's Real Time, known for his razor-sharp wit and unfiltered political commentary, had just returned from a short hiatus. In his comeback tweet, he wrote, "I'm back this Friday, and I'm bringing the fire. Let's just say, Ilhan Omar better bring her a game." Social media exploded. The tweet amassed over 4 million views within 24 hours. It wasn't unusual for Maher to spar with politicians, but calling out Congresswoman Ilhan Omar directly? That was new. Tensions were already high, as Omar had been making headlines recently for her fiery speeches against American foreign policy and corporate interests, and for doubling down on her controversial views about Israel and international aid. Maher's guest list for the upcoming show was leaked. A roundtable including a Republican strategist, a progressive journalist, and yes, Ilhan Omar herself. Cable news networks picked up the buzz. The air was thick with anticipation. Twitter was on fire with hashtags like #Maher vs. Omar and #Realtime Showdown. Some predicted an intellectual debate. Others expected a full-blown televised war. Backstage at the HBO studio in Los Angeles, Bill Maher reviewed his notes while sipping black coffee. He was composed, but there was a glint of mischief in his eyes. He had studied Ilhan's speeches, her interviews, her social media posts. He respected her intellect, he'd never deny that, but he thought her worldview was deeply flawed, idealistic to the point of danger. And tonight, he planned to say it. In a different room, Ilhan Omar was preparing with her aide. Calm and collected, she was dressed in a sharp maroon blazer and a hijab of deep navy blue. She wasn't intimidated. If anything, she welcomed the opportunity. She had felt that voices like hers were often misrepresented, especially on platforms that prided themselves on satire. But tonight, she was going to speak her truth. When the Real Time with Bill Maher title music played, millions of viewers across America and a sizable international audience tuned in. The monologue was vintage Maher. Funny, biting, controversial. He joked about the current state of Congress, Elon Musk's latest tweet storm, and threw in a jab about President Trump's golfing schedule. Then came the moment. The panel discussion. Maher welcomed his guests with a smile. The audience clapped as each took their seats. When Ilhan Omar appeared on camera, the crowd roared. Some cheers, some jeers. She smiled politely. "Congresswoman," Maher began, "thank you for being here. I know you don't usually do shows like mine, but I'm glad you made an exception." "I believe in tough conversations," Ilhan replied confidently. "Good," Maher said, "because tonight, it's going to get real." The discussion began civilly enough, touching on bipartisan gridlock and the economy. But it wasn't long before Maher pivoted. "Let's talk foreign policy," he said, leaning in. "You've been one of the most vocal critics of our support for Israel. And look, I get it, every country deserves scrutiny. But when every one of your speeches reads like a press release from Hamas, that's where I take issue." The audience gasped. Ilhan didn't flinch. "That's not only unfair, Bill, it's dishonest," she shot back. "Criticism of a government isn't anti-Semitism. It's democracy. I criticize U.S. policy too. Does that make me anti-American?" "Come on," Maher said, raising an eyebrow. "You've called Israel an apartheid state. You've questioned their right to defend themselves. That's not policy critique, that's ideology masquerading as activism." The air was thick with tension. Cameras caught the other guests awkwardly shifting in their seats. Twitter was blowing up, and the battle was just beginning. Ilhan Omar's posture remained perfectly composed, but her eyes were sharp. "Bill, when I speak up about injustice, whether it's in Gaza or Minneapolis, I'm doing my job. I was elected to represent my constituents, many of whom come from communities devastated by war, inequality, and racism." Maher smirked. "Yes, and I admire your tenacity, but here's where I get off the train. You frame every geopolitical issue as a struggle of oppressed versus oppressor. That's not nuance, it's narrative. And it's dangerously simplistic." The studio audience was unusually quiet. They weren't sure whether to clap or wince. The tension wasn't just for show, it was real, and every word exchanged was like flint to fire. Ilhan leaned forward slightly, her voice unwavering. "You criticize me for being passionate. But let's be honest, what you call narrative, others call lived experience. I come from Somalia. I know what real authoritarianism looks like. I'm not here to play safe politics. I'm here to challenge systems." "Okay," Maher said, waving his hand. but your version of a challenging the system sometimes feels like you're rewriting the rules. Like when you said America was founded on evil. That's not brave, that's revisionism. You don't throw out the whole house because some rooms need renovation. Ilhan shook her head. It's not revisionism to tell the truth. Was slavery not evil? Was colonialism not violent? You want patriotism, Bill? I'm trying to fix the soul of a nation I actually love, not the sanitized version you keep clinging to. The crowd clapped loudly, some clearly siding with her. But Maher wasn't done. You love America? He shot back. Then stop comparing it to terrorist-run regimes like Iran and Hamas in your speeches. Stop pretending that America is the villain of every global story. It's exhausting. Ilhan responded coolly, no, what's exhausting is this double standard. When people like me point out injustice, we're told to shut up and be grateful. But when you do it on your monologue every week, you're praised as courageous. The conservative panelist tried to chime in, but Maher waved him off. This was personal now. Backstage, producers were losing their minds. Ratings were spiking. Clips were already being sliced and uploaded to YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok by media outlets. One tweet from a conservative account read, Bill Maher is finally saying what everyone's been too afraid to tell Ilhan Omar. Hashtag real-time showdown. Another from a progressive viewer countered, Ilhan Omar is calmly dismantling Bill Maher on his own turf. This is history. Hashtag Maher versus Omar. Back on stage, Maher doubled down. You say you're not anti-American. Okay. But then why do you constantly paint this country in the darkest light possible? Yes, we've made mistakes, horrific ones. But name a nation that hasn't. Why is America always the supervillain in your narrative? Ilhan took a breath. Because this country can be more. But not if we keep pretending that criticism is treason. Not if voices like mine are drowned out by people who claim to be liberal but punch left every time it counts. The audience roared again, some standing. Maher, taken slightly aback, smiled. Well, Congresswoman, he said, tapping his cue cards, you certainly don't pull your punches. And neither do you, she said. But here's the difference. I'm fighting for people who've never had a voice in this country. You're defending a status quo disguised as reason. The studio fell silent. Maher leaned back in his chair, took a deep breath, and said, well damn. This is why you came on, huh? Ilhan gave a slight nod. Exactly. But the most explosive moment was still to come. Maher looked into the camera, glanced back at her, and said, then I have just one more question, and I'm warning you, this is the one America's been waiting to ask you face to face. Bill Maher leaned forward, setting his cue cards down deliberately on the table. The lighting seemed to shift ever so slightly, casting a dramatic hue across the stage. His voice lowered, but the impact of his words was thunderous. Congresswoman Omar, do you believe America is a force for good in the world? The audience fell silent again. Even the usual murmurs and coughs from the back rows faded into non-existence. The panelists froze. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression on Ilhan's face. It was a trap. A loaded question designed to strip everything down to a single, soundbite-ready answer. Ilhan didn't blink. Her eyes locked onto Maher's. I believe America can be a force for good, she replied calmly, but only when it confronts the bad it has done and actively chooses a different path. Maher smirked. See, that's the problem. You can't say it outright. You just can't say yes. Ilhan folded her hands and spoke evenly. Blind patriotism isn't love, Bill. It's delusion. I love this country enough to want to save it from itself, from greed, from systemic injustice. And I'm not going to flatter it into complacency just because you think it makes for good optics. The audience erupted in mixed reactions, some cheering, some booing, many stunned by the intensity. Maher shook his head. You know, I've had Republicans on this show who, despite everything I disagree with, can still look into the camera and say America is good. Flawed, yes, but fundamentally good. Ilhan shot back, and how many of those same people defend voter suppression, deny climate science, or shrug off school shootings? What's more un-American, pointing out injustice or pretending it doesn't exist? A man in the front row stood up and clapped loudly. The camera quickly panned away, but it was clear the moment had pierced through. That's when Maher flipped the script. Okay, then let's talk about you. You've been accused, fairly or unfairly, of anti-Semitism, of being divisive, of pushing narratives that flirt with conspiracy. Some of your own Democratic colleagues have distanced themselves from your rhetoric. Ilhan stiffened just slightly but didn't back down. I've addressed those accusations many times. I've clarified. I've apologized when something I said was misunderstood. But I won't apologize for holding power to account, whether it's in Tel Aviv or Washington, D.C. Maher interrupted, but don't you think there's a difference between criticism of a government and using language that echoes ancient tropes? She replied, I'm a black, Muslim immigrant woman in Congress. My words are dissected under a microscope that most politicians never face. Why is it that when others criticize Israel or U.S. foreign policy, it's policy debate, but when I do it, it's hate? A female journalist on the panel finally spoke. Maybe the problem is that this country still doesn't know what to do with a voice like yours. You're not fitting into the expected mold. Maher responded, and maybe she's using that as a shield against valid criticism. Omar replied coolly, or maybe you're using comedy as a shield to punch down on people trying to change the world. Boom. That one line made the entire room shake metaphorically. Maher leaned back, clearly rattled. Not because he didn't have a comeback, but because the crowd's energy had shifted. Omar wasn't just holding her ground, she was reclaiming it. Clips of the exchange went viral within minutes. One popular YouTube reel titled Ilhan Omar just roasted Bill Maher on live TV reached 3 million views in 2 hours. Another titled Bill Maher exposes Ilhan Omar's anti-American agenda trended in conservative circles. Tucker Carlson tweeted, Bill Maher doing what Congress won't, calling out Ilhan Omar live. Bravo. Hashtag Maher vs. Omar. AOC tweeted, proud of my sister at Ilhan Omar. Spoke truth to power with calm, clarity, and class. Hashtag courage. Meanwhile, Maher's production team whispered into his earpiece. They were down to the final 8 minutes of the segment. But the best was still to come. Maher looked at Omar with a half smile. Okay, Congresswoman. You've taken every punch and given a few back. But I've got one last round. Bill Maher leaned forward like a veteran chess player who had been pushed to the edge of the board but wasn't done playing yet. His eyes narrowed slightly and his voice dipped into that trademark tone of irony he reserved for cutting through the noise. Congresswoman, he said, let's drop the pretense. You came here tonight knowing what this would be. You know I don't pull punches. So let's just go there. Ilhan smiled slightly. Please do. Maher took a breath. Why is it that every time there's a global conflict involving U.S. interests, you're the first to tweet condemnation of America? Not Russia. Not China. Not Iran. America. The country that gave you refuge. A seat in Congress. A voice on the world stage. Oof. The audience gasped. Even the conservative panelist winced slightly. It was a pointed jab, one meant to challenge not just her politics, but her right to challenge it all. Ilhan's face remained calm, but a fire lit behind her eyes. You want to go there, she said, her voice measured. Fine. I came to this country as a child refugee fleeing civil war. I lived in a Kenyan refugee camp. I know what hell looks like. And yes, America gave me safety. But safety without justice is survival, not freedom. She leaned in now, not backing down an inch. I don't owe silence to the country that gave me opportunity. I owe it honesty. What makes America great is not blind loyalty, but our ability to evolve, to be better. Maher nodded slowly. Sure. Evolve. But at what point does your critique become so constant, so one-sided, that it sounds like you're rooting against us? Ilhan fired back, that's what you don't get, Bill. Rooting for change is rooting for America. My job isn't to be the country's cheerleader. It's to be its conscience. The audience clapped again. Harder now. Maher realized he wasn't just in a war of words, he was in a battle of ideas. And Omar wasn't flinching. Then came the curveball. Maher switched tone. You know what's wild? You and I actually agree on a lot. We both can't stand fundamentalism, whether it's Christian nationalism or Islamic extremism. We both hate censorship. We both think the far left and far right are driving people insane. Ilhan tilted her head. Then why attack me like I'm the enemy? Because, Maher said, you are in power. You're not just a voice. You sit on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. You craft policy. And when you say things like, Israel hypnotized the world, or when you reduce complex wars to colonialism tweets, you're not helping. You're pouring gasoline. Omar didn't dodge. I've learned from every mistake I've made. But I won't apologize for calling out human suffering just because it makes some people uncomfortable. My empathy isn't limited by borders or religion. She paused and looked straight into the camera. If you're more upset by my tone than by the wars I speak against, then maybe the problem isn't me. Boom. The crowd went wild. This time, even some of Maher's usual fans stood to clap. Backstage, the producers whispered, this is going to break the internet. And they were right. The internet was already ablaze. Trending on Twitter X. Hashtag Maher vs. Omar. Hashtag Ilhan claps back. Hashtag Bill Maher live. Hashtag voice not echo. YouTube thumbnails popped up instantly. Television, Ilhan Omar drops mic on Bill Maher, you have to hear this. Television, Maher grills Omar, but she fires back. Television, left eats left? Bill Maher and Ilhan explode on air. Even the White House press corps was quietly watching. Maher let out a half-laugh. "You're good, Congresswoman. You're very good." Ilhan nodded. "I came prepared." He looked to the audience, then back at her. "Final thought?" he asked. Ilhan took a beat, then said, "Yes. Criticizing America doesn't mean I hate it. It means I believe in it enough to expect better." Maher leaned back, a long pause filling the space. Then he said, "You know what? That was actually kind of beautiful." The audience clapped again, this time not just for the clash, but the respect forged in the fire of disagreement. The stage lights dimmed just a bit as the final credits began to roll, but the tension and electricity remained. Bill Maher turned to the camera one last time. "Folks, say what you want," he said, "but this was one of the most intense and, dare I say, enlightening conversations we've had here. My thanks to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar for showing up, speaking out, and taking the heat." Ilhan simply smiled, nodding in appreciation. The show ended, but the conversation had just begun. The aftermath. By the time Maher and Omar stepped off the stage and into the backstage hallway, the internet had turned into a wildfire of opinion, analysis, and spin. CNN cut into its nightly broadcast with a breaking news cheerin'. Maher versus Omar. Primetime clash over patriotism, power, and principles. Fox News was quick with its own spin. Ilhan Omar unleashed. Anti-American rhetoric gets standing ovation on Maher's show. And MSNBC's Rachel Maddow? If you didn't watch tonight's Real Time, go watch it now. No matter what side you're on, that was democracy in action. Twitter/X exploded. At Katie Journals. Ilhan Omar didn't flinch. Not once. Maher came with fire, she came with steel. Fire flexed biceps #Maher versus Omar. At Red State Ranger 88. This is what happens when you put radicals on prime time. Maher tried to hold her accountable, but the audience? Sheep. At Young Dems Rising. Bill Maher thought he'd destroy Omar. Instead, she educated a nation. And then, just when everyone thought it was over, Ilhan Omar dropped a tweet that silenced the noise. "Being an American means demanding the best of America. I won't stop. #Patriot with purpose." Inside the green room, backstage, a surprising scene unfolded. Bill Maher walked over to Omar holding 2 bottles of water. He extended one toward her. "Truce?" he asked with a grin. Ilhan raised an eyebrow but took the bottle. "You held nothing back," she said. Maher chuckled. "I never do. But damn, you hit back harder than I expected." She shrugged. "Years of being underestimated will do that." He leaned against the wall and took a sip. "You know, I meant what I said. You and I agree more than people realize. But you also scare people. Because I tell the truth?" "No," he said, looking at her. "Because you're not afraid to break the story they've been telling themselves about what America is." Omar nodded slowly. "Maybe it's time we all stopped telling fairy tales and started writing better ones." Maher smirked. "That would have been a great closing line on air." Omar smiled back. "I saved my best for the people still listening." They both laughed. A real one. One built not on agreement but mutual respect. America reacts. The next day, the New York Times ran a front-page column. "When real time becomes real talk, Omar and Maher show us what debate looks like." At college campuses, debate teams used clips from the episode to analyze rhetoric, composure, and framing. In coffee shops and on conservative radio, people argued fiercely, some calling Omar brave, others calling her dangerous. But one thing was undeniable: the moment had shaken something loose in the American political consciousness. No more scripted softball interviews. No more polite sidestepping. This was raw, live, and unfiltered. And America? Couldn't stop watching. 1 week later, back in Washington, Omar walked through the Capitol with renewed energy. Reporters swarmed her, asking about the show. "Did Maher really try to destroy you?" She smiled. "He tried. But that's what freedom of speech is for, right?" One reporter asked, "Would you go on his show again?" Ilhan paused, thoughtful. "If the goal is honest dialogue? Always." Later that day, her office released a statement titled "Courage and Country," where she doubled down on her belief that challenging America is the most American thing anyone can do. Meanwhile, Maher's team released the full uncut footage of the interview online. Within 48 hours, it became the most viewed episode in real-time history. Bill Maher's monologue, 1 week later. In the next episode of Real Time, Maher opened with this. "Last week, I went head-to-head with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. And let me tell you, I got my ass handed to me in places, but also pushed her in ways she needed to be pushed. That's what this show is about. Not winning. Not canceling. Clashing ideas. He looked into the camera dead serious now. And to everyone who thinks debate is dead, go watch last week's show. It's not dead. It's just been sleeping. Let's wake it the hell up. The audience erupted. The legacy of the showdown. Months later, political commentators still referred to that episode as a turning point. College textbooks referenced the exchange in courses on modern political rhetoric. The Smithsonian's National Museum of American History even added a clip of the confrontation into a rotating exhibit on the power of the spoken word in democracy. What started as an attempt to destroy a political figure became a moment of national awakening. Because at the end of the day, Bill Maher and Ilhan Omar showed something rare in modern politics. Two people who fiercely disagree sharing the same stage, looking each other in the eye and refusing to flinch. Not as enemies, but as citizens.